we're having a new approach to recording where we're always on.
Just in case there's some nuggets in the pre-recording.
Exactly.
That is exactly it. Yeah.
We are streamlining and focusing for 26. So we're going to get rid of this horrible intro we have and start just diving in. Welcome to Work is Weird Now podcast. Today we have Charlie Rogers with us. He is the founder of Undefineable Life Design, and we're going to get into exactly what Undefinable is and what the impact of that is on our professional lives and on on organizations as well. So, Charlie, welcome. Nice to see you here today.
Nice to see you too. Thanks for having me, Alice and Dan.
Yeah, our pleasure. I've just finished reading your book, which is coming out in March.
Yep, March 4th. Yep.
Yep. And a lot of what you talk about is rooted in, I think, the concept of professional identity, right? And you say in the book, we were never meant to be one thing. There is no label that can define us. So can you just start by talking us through what exactly an undefinable is?
So by definition, ironically, for an undefinable is someone who lives beyond conventional labels. So what I mean by that is they see themselves as more than just one thing, so that when you ask them, so what do you do? They're probably going to crease up a little bit and find it a difficult question to answer because there's maybe so many parts of themselves that they could lead with. They could obviously give you what they spend the majority of their time earning on, which is the standard answer to that question. Maybe it's a one-word label. Maybe it's a bit more complicated if they have a few different ways of earning. But they're also perhaps a parent, perhaps a brother, perhaps a family member or a friend, but they have a lot of labels to them. And to an extent, we all do. But I think there's a willingness to see themselves as more than one thing that's underlying all of this. And it's the ability to evolve past those labels too. So rather than saying, oh, I am this thing right now, here and forever, it's I am using these labels to communicate a complex reality of who I am, but I understand that tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, I might actually outgrow them, become something more as well.
Right. So those of us who, when we're asked the question, what do you do? Which I'm asked all the time, and we feel a little uncomfortable with that answer is essentially what we're getting at. And you're saying lean into that, right? Lean into that lack of definition. Why is it so important that we do that? I mean, what value does it bring to us in our lives and our work?
So when we answer with a one-word answer to that question, we often bring a lot of assumptions about who that person is. We start thinking, oh, they said lawyer, that's a respectable job. I should give them a different stance than I would if they said a completely different role. And when we move beyond that, we get to see them and ask questions for who they really are. And yes, it takes longer. I have to spend 30 seconds to 60 seconds answering that question. But the answers that come up and the way someone looks at me is like, oh, I actually connect with you on a much deeper level. So for me, I lead with my purpose, or as I call it in the book, my golden thread instead. And that then brings out that, wow, that's so interesting. And so if I was to say it here, I say, I help those who live beyond conventional labels, the undefinables, to design their life for uniqueness through intimate spaces, life design frameworks, and intentional transitions. And that sort of summarizes all of the offers that I have related to that and all of the services and products I build. But for me, that is a much better hook for an interesting conversation.
It's almost like you're defining yourself in terms of your value as opposed to your job function or your profession, right?
And do you find that people I'm just going to take this back a step. So when I came out of uni, I wanted to be a marketing manager in 5 years. And that was, it was just so linear, right? And I imagine there are people potentially still in that camp of like their career trajectory is, the lawyer route or a doctor, whatever, I don't know, whatever. But do you think that people are almost feeling seen, people who could maybe come out of education at whatever level and don't know what they want to be, this is going to help them feel really seen in a way, because you don't have to be that alinear, be such a label and be like, no, it's all right if there's multiple ways, right?
Yeah, so there's like almost both sides benefit here. So there are those that are unsure of the path they want to take, and they are experimenting and they're trying many things. They're moving jobs pretty often. They're switching roles, like Jen says, moving every year and a half. Like for them, it's thinking, okay, how do I make sense of where I'm going? How do I make sense of who I am? And particularly in a world that's only accelerating through AI, like how does that individual continue to basically experiment with themselves to find roles that don't even yet exist. So it's thinking about possibilities, but there's also those that have gone into traditional roles and perhaps they've not turned out the way they wanted to. Perhaps they've had their parents basically put them through it, or they've chosen themselves as this must be the dream. And then they've realized the dream isn't real. And then they've had to step away and be like, what am I now? And so to let go of a label, particularly when it's ingrained, is really hard if you've chosen that as something that is a big identity part of you.
So there are kind of push and pull factors right now, right? So people who are naturally undefinables, as you define them, and there are people who might find themselves becoming undefinables in their life when they sort of reflect on the choices that got them where they are. But then we also have what's happening in the market with AI and with the changing nature of work and the accelerated pace of change and so on, right? They're actually forcing people to think differently about a single linear career throughout their entire lives as well. So you've almost got these pressures from both sides to take a step back and consider how you might undefine your career path. Is that right?
Yeah, and my thesis on this is the whole archetype of the book, and what I'm helping these individuals do is to find this golden thread, this unique offer that only they can create. And I believe it starts by reflecting on who you are and finding your many interests and then bringing them together in a way that only you can. And that is what I believe will distinguish you from AI, distinguish you from this growing competitiveness and globalized economy. Like, how does that individual stand out? And I think they stand out by leaning into what makes them unique.
So the core question that we have for our episode today is, how do I design a work life that's uniquely mine? So your book, in very clear and straightforward terms, I think, lays out a path to get there. So can you talk us through what that looks like then? Where do you begin that process of defining that unique life?
So the metaphor I use in the book is called the undefinable ascent. And as with any ascent, it starts with understanding the destination. So you imagine it as what I call a purpose acropolis. This is the structure of where you are heading, the destination upon which you want to design. This is the ideal life you are aiming for. It sits atop the mountain at the end of the journey, and it's formed from the materials of your many interests. They form the base layer, the foundations that you then decide to commit to. So which of your interests group into categories? So when you think of myself, I think of, I like hiking, I like running, I like cycling. Why do I like those things? Oh, because they're adventure sports. Okay, so adventure sports is the category. That's what I'm choosing to play in. It gives me enough space to grow. I can take on mountaineering, still fits in there. Or I could decide to let go of one of those interests, but still play in existing category. So I can go deep enough in that area, what I call being semi-pro in a few areas rather than being professional in one or amateur in many. So you find the foundations, you then use them to work out what your keystone is. So this is your golden thread. This is what links together all of those categories. And you put that at the top of your acropolis, and then you cover it with a roof. The roof is your signature expression. This is how your golden thread meets the external world. This is how you brand it, how you add design principles for if you were to create experiences, what would you use that other people can't, and how would you see the world in your lens? So for me, I'd much rather intimate spaces than I would large auditoriums. So I feel like I can connect with people on a much deeper level through that. And then the final part is, what are the pillars? So what are the value streams that bring this to life? And this includes both those that are direct value streams, they pay you in some way and they enable yourself to bring that golden thread and signature expression to life, but also indirect value streams as well. So when you think of all of the 168 hours in a week, how do you spend them? I'm sure we spend a lot of time with family, with friends, with sport, with sleep. So how do we ensure that they enable us to sustain the acropolis too? So that is the end destination, and that is always a starting point, because you need to know where you're going. And in a world where you're not given any goals anymore and there's no ladder for you to climb, for the most of us anyway, it's how do you now create your own end destination.
When did you realize you had a model? When did you have that moment and go, hang on, there's a framework there?
Yeah, May last year, I remember it on a run, a classic. I always get these things on runs. So I came back and I was like, give me some paper. I need it.
Where's the paper? Where's the pen? Don't forget.
Yeah, I was like, don't talk to me. I remember coming back with my partner and I was like, she just starts talking. I'm like, no, just, I need to sit down real quick. And then I draw out this this lovely kind of drawing of taking your many interests and then bringing them together into a central thread and then expressing them in many ways. And I was like, this many to few to many, that's at the core of it. And then that idea became like the golden thread in the sense of your many interests, your value streams at the end, and going semi-pro by narrowing and using signature expression to go louder at the end. And I was like, okay, I have some of these words, but that expression then evolved over time as I kept putting earlier versions of the book out there. And I eventually came to, well, towards the end of the process, to be fair, the metaphor. And I was like, wow, okay, I have this Acropolis, and now it fits in this ecosystem where the other parts of the book also fit in as well, with the energy toolkit of your capacity for the climb and the income pathway being how you get from the foothills and the base to the mountaintop. And so now it's like a world upon itself. But at the beginning, it was just a drawing after a run. And yeah, it took me several iterations and evolutions of it. And I had to keep throwing away the past version and then taking the new one on to get to where it is now.
And were you doing that with real life examples? Was it your own, or did you have people doing that?
So at the beginning, like I was using it for myself primarily, and I was being one that was documenting my own journey through my newsletter, had other people relate to it, and then had some coaching clients that I then started using this framework with, and have worked with several this year as well to implement it. And through my Golden Thread program, have seen them take their many interests and then work out the categories, find the golden thread, and then be able to use signature expression and the value streams. And they've all lived it real time in the sense that every time I started a new client, I was like, I've got a slightly better way of expressing this. How do I bring that into the next version as well? So they've all been, really great to see and turned into case studies that are now in the book. But they've also been a great way of me like using this idea beyond myself and seeing it hit reality too.
There are a couple of things that struck me as being not what I expected as I was looking at your purpose Acropolis. One was when you talk about interests. I thought that was quite interesting because you're not just talking about those professional interests or the things that you're good at school. I think there's a lot of discussion about that too, right? Like, what am I good at? Where which particular kind of traditional places of or categories of learning am I attracted to, or was I thriving in? You actually talk about almost going back to your childhood and saying, what interests did I cultivate then? What came out of my background, my family, my culture, and actually starting at that point to talk about your interests. So it wasn't just like, what am I interested in doing right now, or what do I wish I had more time for, which is also part of it, but actually looking at the entire context of your life. And I think what I took from that was almost recognizing that the things that interested us at various different points of our lives add up to something meaningful, right? It's not necessarily about right now. Is that how you approached it?
For sure. It's all about the raw ingredients. So for me, it's like we might be in a chapter of our life where we no longer play with Lego because that was something we did when we were younger. But maybe we have this obsession with construction that's still with us in some way. And that's actually quite true for me. I still watch a lot of YouTube videos on big infrastructure projects. But it's understanding that we shouldn't just look at our past interests and be, that's not who we are now, so let's forget about it. It's like, no, what's the learning from that? How do we build them together, and how do we be able to overlap the categories? Like in the workshops I delivered in 2025, the 4 of them, when I got all of these individuals together, like the permission it gave them when I gave them all of these, like I gave them a stack of like 100 cards each and was like, right, okay, write down all your interests, 1 interest per card. And then you'd see them come out with like 50, 60 in front of them and be like, wow, I didn't know I had this many interests. I thought that I just did these 3 things. And I was like, no, like give yourself permission to explore those parts of yourself. And then it's like, okay, this is overwhelming now. How do I make sense of all this chaos, all these many interests? And I'm like, okay, now you start grouping them, put them into categories, and now we can start finding how they form together as well. So the first part has to be expansionary. It has to be finding every part of yourself that you can look through outdated, inherited, current, soon, ideal interests, and then be able to bring them together into, what you want to lead with in the future, because the life you're living right now might not be the one you actually want. And so if you reject past versions of yourself, you reject past possibilities as well.
I think the other thing that struck me was this idea that once you've narrowed down those interests and the things that you want to focus on, the things that form your golden thread, you suggest becoming semi-professional, as you mentioned before, rather than professional in these things. What does that mean? Why wouldn't we want to become as as adept as possible at the things that we are good at?
So for me, it's seeing how you can be semi-pro in a few things that you can uniquely combine together. The best example of this is my own experience of running. So sport has quite clear categories of what is amateur, semi-pro, and pro generally, though for each individual, it can be different depending on the sport. So for me, with my running journey, I got into running when I was about 14, and I kept doing it throughout school. I'm from one of the worst ones there at the club to being vice captain at 18. And then I went to Loughborough University, and out there you surround yourself with GB athletes, and they're all really good. So you go from being what you think is pretty good to then being, oh yeah, bottom third again. So you're kind of doing the last one round on the track, and then you focus on it for 4 years. They normalize 100-mile weeks. You get better at it, and then by the time you leave, you're like, oh, okay, I'm posting some pretty good times. And then following that, basically thought, how do I take this? And I had COVID hit me with the 2 years of when I wanted to do my running and be able to actually push this to as far as I could. And I was like, oh, okay, I can't do that anymore. So instead I decided to sign up for an Ironman. And I was like, it's on a 10-year bucket list. Why not just do it now? And that meant learning 2 new sports. So I had this like deep level of expertise with running, but I could then learn enough about, say, cycling and swimming to get good at them, and then combine those skills together. And was like, okay, now I can be pretty good at triathlon. I then decided to push it pretty hard. I took all my learning from running, applied it to the sports, went deep into it, and got out to May, about 2 months before my Ironman race with the triathlon club, and went out to Mallorca and got a bit overconfident because I thought, oh, I've been training on this aluminium bike that's really heavy all winter, that's like 200 pounds that you've had for a while. And then they gave me this carbon bike that was really light. And I was like, okay, let's absolutely speed it. I took a lot of the hills pretty quick. And then on the descent on over 150K days, overconfident, backed myself too much, and was living in this idea of who I could become. And basically took the switch back too quickly. On the third one, it was about 180 to 70-degree turn over this bridge, and I was going like 63 kilometers an hour. And there's me trying to squeeze these brakes, but the bike's shaking. There's leaves on the ground. It's been raining that day as well, and I kind of had a choice to make. It was either, do I hit the crash barrier or do I lean into the ground and scrape my entire body? I chose to hit the crash barrier, for better or worse. And I hit it. Bike stayed on the road. I went over, caught myself on some of the barbed wire, and it's like a 10-foot drop. And I like landed in this rock on the river below. I managed to pull myself up from it. I have a team with me who's cycling out with me, so I'm not alone in that. That would have been a lot worse if I was alone. And then as soon as I get on the side, I'm like, oh, everything hurts. So I lie down and look up at the sky, and they all give me their jackets. I think I had about, I don't know, 20 jackets that was given to me as people cycled by. So I was there just like getting warm as they brought up the ambulance to the cliffside. And then they morphined me up, took me to hospital, and they did all the x-rays. And the only thing I broken was my little finger. Everything else was fine. I had a very bruised back, and I had to prove I could walk to leave the hostel. I was like, you drugged me enough, I can do that. So got back from the hostel to the hotel, and then sat on the beachside for the rest of that week. And then I had to face the choice of, do I just do the Ironman because it's something I've committed to and I could probably finish it and recover in like 45 days, or do I defer it by a year? And I decided to defer it by a year because I was like, that's the bigger challenge here. I then went to do the Ironman UK, and I also qualified for European champs to represent GB the following year as well. And then when it came to race day and I did it, I like hyped up so much about what I wanted to achieve. I was like, it has to be like sub 10 hours, which only like 3 people did on that race day. It's like one of the heaviest courses in the world. And when I got over that line and my body's cramping, I was like, oh, I still feel nothing. Why do I feel nothing? And I had to tell myself, I was like, it's because this race was the last 1%. I'd done 99% of the effort of the last 2 years. The victory lap, this is the fun part. But it didn't feel that fun. It felt a bit pointless. And I was like, why do I feel nothing? And I realized that afterwards that I'd been like numbing myself to a lot of it. And I'd been basically focused so hard on this becoming a core part of my identity that I lost the joy elsewhere. And so for me, stepping back from that was a really important decision. It took me a little while to refine that focus. And so for me, it's a bit of a long-winded answer to your question, but it's thinking about how do I do something to a level that I know I'm pretty good at, like I can represent GB at age group, and that's pretty good. But also, if I wanted to be the best in the world and do this professionally, it requires me sacrificing even more than 20 hours a week. I have to give up 40 hours, 60 hours, 80 hours. It has to be my obsession. And I have to compete with other people who want the exact same slots. There's only 5 slots or 4 slots that represent GB each year. Like, okay, I have to be on that schedule. I have to define my entire life around it. And for me, that's not what I want. I don't want to be so singular in that area. But the deep expertise that I built over the years from endurance sports, adventure sports, is allowing me then to think about some of the propositions, some of the parts of my life that I want to bring forward with me, but doesn't have to be all consuming too.
Yeah, and allows you to look at those skills that you've gained and say which one of these actually makes me happy, which ones excite me, and which ones do I want to leave behind. I think this also is a testament to the power of your approach, which is that actually there are many models, I think, that would say, here's where I'm trying to get to, and here's my path to getting there. What you also say is that income pathway, or that sort of ascent up the mountain towards your Acropolis, it has to be coupled with this energy toolkit, right? Which is that constantly keeping things in balance and ensuring that what you're giving is not taking away from something else that is important to you. Is that right?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people would see this as a purely financial pathway. They'd see it as something where they just need to grow enough revenue to sustain everything else. The income comes first. And to an extent, sometimes that is necessary. Like if you are living paycheck to paycheck, that is a reality. But a big part of this too is your energy toolkit. It's listening to what your body says and how it can inform you of certain decisions. So within the toolkit, there are also a lot of metaphors there. So when I think about, firstly, the body, I think about the boots. When you wear boots and you go for an ascent, they will give you blisters from time to time. To what extent do you listen to the blisters or do you power through? That's an important decision. It's signaling to you that something's wrong here. Maybe you should tighten them up, or maybe wear longer socks and be able to sustain yourself a bit longer. The first part of any energy toolkit is being able to hear those signals, because with them you can then adjust and protect your baseline to make those adjustments as well. And that then allows you to think about the different paces, the different stopwatches you might use. So say I might be sprinting literally in how I'm writing a book for a period, but then I might also be jogging how I'm doing my sport. That's quite literally what I'm doing right now, is that I am jogging my sport because it's sustaining me rather than being my major focus. And so by thinking about the different value streams or pillars of your life and how they can be running at different speeds together, that's also pretty helpful, because it allows you to think about it instead of just, I'm in a sprint phase right now. You're not in an entirely sprint phase. I'm sure you're resting other parts of yourself to be able to focus on this one area. But seeing it as a multitude of different speeds rather than just one speed is super helpful. But overall, I'd say, yes, for the income pathway to be sustainable and not rushed and not something that you're doing from scarcity, you have to ground yourself in the energy toolkit first.
Okay. So this is something that you have noted as potentially particularly relevant to young people at the moment. Obviously applicable to anybody. Anybody can design a work life that is uniquely theirs at any point in their career. But you found particular relevance among that generation, partly because I assume you're part of that generation, but also because Gen Z is looking at a context where the social contract has been broken. And so they have to look at their careers differently. And they are, based on the data that we have. So can you talk a little bit about your work with that particular cohort and how this really can help young people to understand what kind of work life they want to design for themselves?
Yeah, so I guess my experience here, I'll speak to you first. So I built a nonprofit community called Undefinable Community. It's for people who are in the age discovery, which I classify as being 22 to 35. Though, of course, people will fit either side of that because there are no labels. But that is a helpful guide for us. And for them in particular, and the ones that I've coached who also fit in that bucket, Generation Z has its own timelines, but I'd say this is a similar overlap with young people. I'd say that there are a lot of individuals there who really want to figure out how to make sense of everything, because they've been hit with, well, firstly, a COVID experience. I mean, that was literally my final year of university. I had so many friends who were graduating into jobs and then they just got completely cut. And they then had to cliff edge and find their own way out of it. And they're like, where do I go from here? They just all basically rescinded these offers, and then they stayed at home for a year and went traveling or figured something out. And then maybe they got a job or two in 2021, 22, or they built a business along the side. That year became very foundational for a lot of us. And I'm sure that's true of every generation. But because you're entering the workforce, you don't have a current job to then be furloughed from. You're still figuring everything out. So that was a very big reality from a lot of people in this generation that formed how they saw the world, as did the remote first element as well. So a lot of people that I've met along this path have seen that, okay, remote is a default part of the world. And the reality is Zoom and Google Meets are only popularized really since 2020. Before that, you might have done a Skype call. And so that I think is also pretty curious, is that this whole hybrid way of working and digital tool set is actually quite new. But for a lot of young people, this is what they know. This is what they've lived. And so they assume that that is in by default. So there is a almost reluctance to just be in the office and have presenteeism for the sake of it. It's more questioning around like, why are we here? Is there a clear reason for meeting? Or are we just showing up because everyone says we should? So I think a lot of this generation, they need a reason that can sustain them beyond just it being why we do it. This is how we've always done it. That's always the worst reason. So that's, I think, a big factor. And then more recently is the kind of narrative around AI. Of course, the cost of living crisis as well. Like for a lot of us, spending half our income on rent. And the other half then is like, okay, I can pay for a few things, but how am I going to save for this house that you want me to have? Like this reality of young people being unable to afford the kind of lifestyle or the life milestones that their parents had, and it's very much out of reach from them. They are then questioning, where does it go? What's the point? And so they are changing a lot faster, being like, oh, I just save up for the next holiday? Do I just go and do my traveling and maybe figure it out in Australia? That's a pretty big classic common cause of people to do right now. But it's because there's no obvious milestones to aim for that feel tangible. They'll feel so out of reach. And that then leads a few down the path of, I've just got to build a business. That's the only way out of here, is I've got to play big upside and grind on that. Or it's, I've got to go and work in a high flying like banking role where I can earn enough money, save it, and then I can go and live this like other life that I want. And it kind of pulls people at the extremes because they feel like there's no average life here that's worth climbing for, because the average life doesn't even include the traditional milestones of a house or a marriage. They all feel too expensive and out of reach.
This may be a strange question, but in the context of AI, why is it so much more important that we lean into our unique elements as individual human beings?
So I call this the automation of the average. So for those that have or are quite good at something, say the most obvious is, say, writing. We can see that when you scroll your LinkedIn feed nowadays and the entire platform is filled with AI written content, it's kind of quite obvious. You can see when it uses certain ways of writing. And if you are relying entirely on it and not being able to be the first creator of something where it helps you to amplify it, then you are basically confronting the reality that like AI is just going to replace your role, replace your skill set. And that is a big threat to those that are so singularly disciplined in a certain area. And so if you can combine like deep expertise and understanding of that skill with a kind of unique tone of voice, with a unique way of standing out, then you're going to be able to differentiate yourself from, that automation of the average.
Does your model work for people outside of, I know it's undefinable, but that age range that you give, so 22 to 35, what about people that are on the above the 35 age range?
For sure. I've coached clients that have been older as well. And I often see there's parallels between those who are entering into the age of commitments, is what I call it. So those that want to prepare for a family, who are thinking about, how do I commit to something for the next 5 to 10 years that enables me to build this high leverage that I can then charge for and earn enough income from. There's that group who are like pre-family. And there is another group who are like post-family, who are like 50s, 60s, who are thinking, okay, I've got a whole nother life chapter here. life is becoming longer. We're living for much longer as a society. So it's like, how do I then make the most of that period as well? And there are ironically a lot of parallels between the two of them. But there are also people who fit in the between who perhaps haven't had kids or are thinking about their life in a different way or are willing to, break things up and experiment earlier. And it also works for them as well. So I'd say it's for those who are entering into a stage of wanting to commit to all of the many different parts of themselves they've had before and make sense of who they are and where they're going.
This is obviously, on the face of it, a model and an approach that would lead to someone feeling greater fulfillment, more like they can bring their entire selves to their work context and that they're making true use of the unique value that they can bring to the world. And I can see that very clearly in the model that you've built. I think maybe is what's less clear on the face of it, and it'd be great to hear some examples from you, is does this actually sustain an income throughout the course of my life? And I'm sure you've seen success come out of this in many, many different times. So it'd be great to hear some of the best examples of that.
So like if I frame this as the income pathway will give us some answers, and I'll give you some examples as well. So early on, what I talk about is getting a foothold on the income pathway. This is like experimenting with an offer that resonates with the advocates that you've generated through planting your flag and being loud online. It's like, how do I get that first thing that people are willing to pay me for? What I call like an easy yes offer. So someone that you might spend like, say, £10, £20, £30, something that someone can go, yes, I'll just pay for that. And then it validates, oh, this thing is worth being paid for. Okay, now I can think about it as how do I improve it? How do I scale it from there? My own example personally is like this workshop piece that I've launched like this year, was thinking, how do I take my ideas from a one-to-one setting to a group setting? And at first it was just £30 for a 2-hour session. And I was like, okay, that's pretty good value. That's an easy yes offer. And then as people interacted with it, gave me great feedback, got like a 9.3 out of 10 for it. I was like, okay, there's some tweaks I can make. I can add some food, I can add half an hour to it, and then I can improve it and make it even better. And so by then iterating, improving, I can add a bit more to the price point. I can then think about if it can evolve into a day experience rather than a singular 2-hour experience. I can then take those that have engaged with it and think about if there are ways of upselling into other coaching offers as well. And it then forms like my foothold that I can then build from. Then there is a stage of which we signpost. So once you have the credibility and you've built the expertise, the authority online where you've related to other people that have built in the similar space or are known as the go-to in that area, then when you come to pricing, you can think about it beyond just time. So a lot of people, when they describe how they sell, oh, I just sell my time, my hours. It's this much per day, per month, per week. But actually, you can also price your outcomes as well. So you can also charge for the percentage of commission. You can also charge for equity. You can also charge for rev share. There are many ways of cutting that, and you need the credibility to do it in the first place. But once you do, you can then own the upside as well. And I mean, a prime example, the one I use in the book that you've also interviewed previously is Ben Legg as well. And he has many different signposts, and I won't speak for him. I'm sure he has his own story with it, but he will price some of his clients at that deliverable based outcome. So he will be able to charge them for purely just here's the project outcome that you'll get and the data set you'll get access to. That is more of the deliverables basis. There are other clients that he'll charge for his time with as well. And there are even other clients that he'll bring a whole team around and he'll charge either for their time with a added amount on or with a deliverable basis that he can then leverage through them organizing it that he then approves. So he has his reputation allow him to charge a lot more. And he's perhaps one of the most successful portfolio careerists I've seen in terms of his ability to revenue generate as well. Not that I can speak of numbers for him.
Where do conventional career paths fit into this, right? So if I'm a doctor, right, or a nurse, I've got the qualification, I've come out of school and I've been given this thing that says that I am now licensed to practice medicine. How does this apply to me, or does it not? Am I just not an undefinable when I can say I'm a doctor?
You're definitely more on the definable side in the sense that you have a much more linear pathway ahead of you that if you want to pursue, you can and is in front of you. But there are also those, I mean, one of the famous examples is like Ali Abdaal, who did get his qualifications as a doctor, did it for a year, but also was building his YouTube channel alongside, and the YouTube channel sort of took off, and now he does his YouTube full time and frames himself as like an ex-doctor, which is interesting because it almost uses the authority of who he previously was, even though he still doesn't do it. So that is also, yeah, very clever as an authority piece. But I'd say it's open to them, particularly if they want to change it. But if you are happy and content with the path you've chosen, then there's a pretty clear kind of guideline for the next 20 years of your life. So that is perhaps a privilege in the modern world. And it might also be coming and changing as, particularly, say, we pick another traditionally linear pathway of like law. Then with AI encroaching in that space, you might lose some of the entry-level jobs in the way that it's being displaced that we haven't seen before as well. So it might still change in the linear careers and they might be more open to it. But as it currently stands, I'd say, yeah, you have a much clearer pathway ahead of you than most of us.
What's your ambition with the book, with the Undefinables, with everything? What is your, because you're clearly very ambitious. In so many senses of the word, you've talked so fluently about like your sporting career, etc. Like what is it that you want? What does fulfillment look like for you?
So for me, a big driving motivator for this is to get to a point where I'm working like 3 days a week, earning over 100K a year, and I'm doing it on aligned work that is delivering the way I uniquely see the world, so that when I have kids, I can be present with them. That is kind of like an underlying motivation of the ambition here. And how that's tangibly brought to life is I kind of give myself like 3 years to get to that point. And I see, well, what I've actually done recently is mapped out the next ascent. So I'm kind of reaching the top of my own Acropolis right now. By the final step is a stairway. It's prioritizing your time. It's basically forming the path so others can follow you. And this is the book for me. So I'm effectively climbing onto the Acropolis and I'm seeing it come to me. And I expect that when the launch comes, I will feel this sense of, whoa, I've done it. What now? And so I've done a lot of reflection recently on trying to understand what the mountain behind is. And I think the mountain behind is where I bring this ascent to life in reality. And so I then host a physical ascent where I take people on a climb and we go through the energy toolkit. I get out of my backpack the actual tools and we go through the income pathways from base camp literally all the way up to the top as well. So I can then give the metaphor, I can combine my adventure sports, I can combine my intimate spaces of the community, I can combine it all into what I think will be a really great experience for everyone and will drive home the metaphor that I'm creating as well. So that is the next milestone, the next magnum opus thereafter my book as well.
I think what's really nice about this approach that you've laid out here is that we can all pretty much acknowledge that the vast majority of people currently in the workforce or coming into the workforce, either by design or by circumstance, will find themselves undefinable at some point, right? Or undefined, less defined than they were potentially. And I think what's nice about this, it puts a lot of positivity around the opportunity that presents. And I think that is maybe what people are looking for at the moment, is the sense that something is not lost, but actually there's all of it to gain if you view it in the right way, which is a really nice way of looking at things. In terms of organizations, because I think one of the big challenges we're going to have is we understand what individuals are going to have to do to adapt to the new world order, but how can organizations also be better prepared to deal with what employees are going to inevitably find, which is that their conventional paths are less defined than they thought?
So I did have a chapter on this in the book. I have subsequently removed this because it probably sets up for a future book.
The secret chapter.
Book part 2.
Yeah, book part 2. Yeah. There are future books in me, I'm sure. But I think this is part of it, is how does the organization engage with the undefinable? And crucial to this is that they open work to be beyond simply 9 to 5, 40-hour a week employment, and think about it as how they build the lifetime value of those that engage with their company. So you know how we think about our clients or customers over their LTV, how they can basically sustain and buy from us beyond just the sales cycle. It's also thinking about that through the employees. So it's like, what's the advocate lifetime value? How does this person, yes, maybe work for us employed for a year and a half? Cool. but then they leave on great terms and they refer in your next hire. And then they maybe become a client of yours in the future or a supplier of yours. They form part of a bigger ecosystem. And my big idea for the undefinable companies, should we say, in the future is that they see that value and they double down on it, and they see relationships as existing beyond just an employment. And they think about how there's an ecosystem of people that engage with the company in different means, and employment is just one of those means. And they want to optimize for recommendation and for that lifetime value.
Right.
I
Perfect.
love that.
Yeah, I love it too. Okay, well, so you've got the book coming out in March. So where can people find you, find more information moving forward?
So undefinableLifeDesign.com is the website. You can also connect with me at Real Charlie Rogers on LinkedIn. And yeah, from there, I've got a newsletter that I'm sure will be a lot louder with over the following months. And I'll also be getting together a launch squad from the start of February where people can join for early access and for some of the launch specials. I'm still working out the exact price point, but we'll give you a Kindle discount on day one if you join the launch squad.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Charlie. It's been great to have you.
Been a great chat. Yeah.
Yeah. Good luck with everything.
Thank you.
See you at the book. We'll see you at the book launch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very excited. Okay. Thank you.